Hello, good afternoon, officially 12:01 p.m. Welcome to our April webinar hosted by the EBPA Absence Management. We have a great presentation lined up for you guys today. I'm going to pass it over to Matthew Bryan, who's going to talk about our June seminar and introduce our speaker.
Thanks, Andrew. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone out there in virtual land. We can't see you, but you can see us. We have Dan Hoffman today from Principal Financial Group, Senior Director of Business Development. I'll introduce him in just one second. But just a quick reminder, housekeeping. Also, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box down towards the bottom, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. And then also, please mark your calendars for Thursday, June 12th for our annual EBPA seminar. We have 5 dynamic speakers offering 5 CE credits, and one of those being an ethics credit. You can register on the website. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce Dan Hoffman. Dan's been with Principal for 35 years, working with the workplace benefits team the entire time. Over the years, he's helped Principal with opportunities to lead teams in the life and disability claims department. He helped them create and implement the team focused on case installation for their larger customers and oversees sales and support account management activities in all the regional offices. In his current role, Dan works closely with the sales and account management staff across the country to assist with their new business initiatives and enrollment strategies. Throughout his time there at Principal, Dan has been the primary subject matter expert on absent management. And at Principal, he was the key architect with their Principal absent management solution that he's going to talk about today as well. Welcome, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I need you just to follow me around, right? And we can just have that announced anywhere we go. So appreciate that very much. Hello, everybody. Just wanted to kind of take us through. Here's a bit of an agenda to kind of help us navigate. I want to give us a little soft landing into just some high-level pieces, some foundational work as it relates to the Family Medical Leave Act and the Americans with Disability Act. So forgive me, I'm going to be using acronyms. I will do my best to make sure I pause and explain most of those, but in the insurance arena, that's often where we want to utilize, so it's tough to get over. And then want to just kind of stair step into kind of, again, starting at that federal level, what's in play for employers and what they need to be on the lookout for, but then take it down to a state level. Number of states have their own types of unpaid leave programs and policies. Then I want to make sure for the audience we outline 2 distinctive areas. We have statutory disability. So there's states that are utilizing a program where it's for my covering, essentially think about it as a state mandated short-term disability program. So it's my own serious health condition. And then probably more of the arena, that last one where we're often seeing now a lot of work be going on is around those states that are doing the paid family and medical leave. So actually the paid component to that. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the foundational pieces of it. So FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act. It's been in place since 1993. So this isn't something new, something that is going through there. But it ebbs and flows within that employer population on what they need to do. So what I wanted to give us at a baseline, right? When I'm saying FMLA, we're talking about 12 weeks of unpaid job protected leave. That's the baseline. We know, right, that employers can allow employees to maybe have access to sick leave, or they may have short-term disability or PTO, vacation time that they could potentially be using while they're unapproved. But the actual FMLA regulations, that is an unpaid leave, and it's there for that job protection. That's the primary goal of that, is 12 weeks of job protected leave within a 12-month period of time. I've got intent, eligibility, reasons, and types. As we kind of block through those, intent, I kind of giggle now in today's age in 2025 where you look at these items, but roll the clock back 30 plus years when we're talking about this. And so really the kind of the rollout of that, what we're all challenged with and we're faced with at our employers and in our own personal lives, of that work-family balance, right? Being able to still commit to my employer, but balance that with what I have at home and the different items that I need to make sure that I'm addressing as a parent, a spouse, a friend, a caregiver, as we go through there. The cornerstone is that job protection, right? So making sure that an employer, while I'm on approved leave, can't be doing anything with my job, can't be terminating me while I'm on approved leave. I'm protected. I have that as a part of my overall responsibility. And then discrimination. Where I would often go with it is that an employer can't put up any barriers to be able to file for FMLA or prevent me from filing an FMLA claim or treating employees differently. Johnny's been with us 25 years, been a very loyal worker, right? I'm going to afford Johnny a little bit of more flexibility around maybe when paperwork is due or when it comes in or how much time he's going to take. Betty, she's been with us 18 months and we've had just issue after issue. And so maybe I'm going to treat that differently. And I'm going to really make sure that the due dates are firm and all that stuff. Something that employer can't do, right? We need to make sure that we're looking at each individual situation and that personal experience and what's going through there. So having that consistency and that approach is what is the cornerstone. Eligibility, I've got a next slide that'll kind of take us into that piece of it, but I just definitely want to make sure that we make a distinction between a covered employer and a covered employee. And you see there the private, public, and schools. I'll give some definition around that. So there is some uniqueness on that piece of it. Under reasons, FMLA, it is for my own serious health condition. So something that I'm going to be off work because of my own medical situation. Or as you can see here, right, it can also include some bonding time through birth, adoption, or foster care of a family member, so my children, my spouse, parents, those caregiver aspects that are a part of that. And then I'll call out one specific piece is there is also a part of the federal laws that it's the USERA. So it's the US, basically it's a federal military leaves. So that's that qualified extengency that you see here. So there can be up to 26 weeks of available leave in those situations. Everything else would be in that 12-week increment. Under types, 3 ways that I can essentially use my FMLA time. It can be continuous. I'm off work 100%. I'm going to have surgery. I'm going to be off for 6 weeks until my recovery, until I come back, right? Probably most straightforward process. Reduced, maybe I started as a continuous leave and now I've maybe 4 weeks into my recovery, my physician has said, hey, you're okay to go back to work, say 20 hours a week, maybe with these restrictions or limitations. And if the employer accepts it, for simple math, right? I could have 4 hours of work every day, Monday through Friday, and then 4 hours of FMLA time, right? Because I'm working my way back to a full-time return to work. Intermittent, I would say that is the bane of all HR existence, right? This is where it often gets to be a struggle. And even with some of our solutions that we talk about here at Principal, where we spend a lot of time. The way I will kind of define this is essentially intermittent can be foreseeable and unforeseeable. Foreseeable, I'm having surgery. It's a pregnancy, right? I have a known medical event that is coming up. So I'm doing planning and I will need time off on an incremental basis. I may need just a couple of hours for one day. I may need a full day, but there's a little more schedule around that. And I'm able to communicate with my employer my plans because it's known. I maybe have appointments and everything scheduled and booked. Unforeseen are situations, think about the classic, maybe like with migraines or an asthma diagnosis. So something that is a chronic condition, but it may be something where symptoms crop up the morning, an hour before I need to be at work, right? And so then it's kind of more of an unforeseeable situation where I need to call in, and let them know that I won't be able to come in today and that I'm utilizing FMLA for the day because of my condition. So that it just gets very tricky for HRs, business owners to be able to monitor and track that I used 2 hours on this day, I used a day the following week, and how does that all work in there? So sometimes they're kind of handcuffed about what they can do with that process and how they can actually work with them. The definitions, covered employer. So for private employer, 50 or more employees, and then there's a kind of an extension, an add-on to there. With 20 or more work weeks in the current or preceding calendar year. In simplest terms, the Department of Labor says, okay, employer, you hire your 50th employee. You're not automatically subject to offer and make sure everything is publicized regarding FMLA. We're going to give you a grace period here of 20 weeks, right? So that clock starts to tick once I hire my 50th employee. The thing they want to prevent is I may be at 50 today, and next week, another separate employee puts in their resignation, and now I'm back at 49, right? And now I'm dipped under. So it gives them a little safety net there as that employer continues to grow and reaches that plateau. They have time to make sure that everything is formulated, properly set up, and they can execute on providing FMLA services. The government agencies or the public agencies and schools, you'll see there no minimums. So you could have smaller organizations. Schools would be primary schools, secondary schools. So it would leave out like preschools and those types of situations there. But you could have a smaller, say, private school, or you could have a smaller school district that may be under 50, that employer, that school, or that government agency does have to provide FMLA to their employees. So I just want to make that distinction for you as we look at that private versus those two additional sectors. Covered employee, 3 things listed there. I will, as we walk through this, the first 2 are really the primary ones that we're looking at. And we'll talk about that 50/75 here a little bit. So in order to be eligible for FMLA, right, I'm work for a covered employer. The first thing I have to establish is that I have worked for that employer more than 12 months. Doesn't have to be consecutive. That could be someone who's maybe seasonal, or maybe they work, let's say in like the construction arena, where there could be work and then there could be periods of a layoff and then called back to work. So as long as in aggregate they hit that 12 months, they have to establish that to meet the first criteria. If I meet that, and now I need to actually file an FMLA claim, I have to have worked a minimum of 1,250 hours in the preceding 12 months in order to be eligible. So that's the second tier, that 1,250 hours in the 12 months prior to the start of my FMLA claim. Last one. This one's a tricky one, and one that has certainly post-pandemic. I wish the Department of Labor would execute some real definition and some rigor around that, and so far they've kind of failed. The idea behind that, let's use an example. I'm an employer, I have a total of 100 employees. 85 are based here in Des Moines, Iowa, where I'm located, and that's our home office. So 85 employees work at that brick and mortar. The other 15 are based in my satellite office and report in Kansas City, right? And that's where they report, that's where they work. Under this regulation piece of it, since the Kansas City location only has 15 and they don't have more than 50 employees within a 75-mile radius of that office, technically only the 85 in Des Moines would meet that definition of a covered employee and be eligible. That gets tricky, right? Of employers, think about multi-state and what they're doing. Think about the hybrid, the work environment that we're in, the remote work that goes on. So essentially, Department of Labor has allowed employers to essentially kind of waive that requirement, meaning they can be more generous. So I see a number of our employers that waive that requirement. So in our sample of Des Moines, Kansas City, they're affording and allowing those 15 in Kansas City to still file for FMLA as long as they still meet these first two requirements, okay? Clear as mud as we go through this. All right, let's shift into ADA. So Americans with Disabilities Act. You can see it predates the FMLA by 3 years. But sometimes it's a little bit unknown of how all this process works. There was a major amendment that was done in 2009. And then, of course, right, I think today, I haven't watched the news, but I think there's still a Department of Labor and an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We'll see, right, of how things are going. But Department of Labor oversees the FMLA, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, oversees the Americans with Disabilities Act. Again, they're not always talking to each other, as you can imagine. The big thing for us, and for what I've learned as we educate and talk with employers, is leave of absence is a form of reasonable accommodation. It works alongside those work site accommodations that you and I often think about when you hear the term ADA. The ramps, the accessibility into my building, as a worker, those ergonomic factors, be it the desk, keyboard, the chair, things that can help me perform my job with an accommodation. Leave is also a form of reasonable accommodation. So employers need to make sure that they're doing these interactive processes. So they could be 50 or more lives, be eligible for FMLA, right? Be a covered employer, but for some reason the employee isn't eligible. Maybe they haven't worked the 12 months to be established. Employers should still be looking at that leave request through the lens of ADA and determine if that leave should be a reasonable accommodation and have an interactive process with the employee to make that determination. You can see it's got different eligibility too. A private employer of 50 or more for FMLA, this goes all the way down to 15 lives. So just a note, right? You're not off the hook as from an employer standpoint based on where I'm at. There can be some requirements. The last thing I want to call out there is the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, PWFA for my acronyms. That just went into effect in June of 24. Again, probably one of the biggest first federal legislation since 2009 and any major amendments. But essentially what it's doing is mandating that employers must provide specific accommodations to pregnant workers. So again, it rolled out June of last year. I will say there are a handful of states, I want to say 6 states, kind of South Central, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi areas that have filed for a stay, right? And they're contesting the rollout of this. And the main piece of it, I'm not getting political here, but the main component of their objection is within the PWFA, there is accommodations that are related to abortions. So you have some of those states and those politicians and courts that are taking exceptions with that. So more to come, but certainly something that we want to make sure that today employers have that visibility. All right, let's transition into the state leaves and what we're looking there. So we kind of started from this federal landscape. We've got a good foundation. Now let's talk about states. These are some of the common state leave types that we see across the country. So little less known, or what I would say even more specific, right? Bone marrow and organ donation, the domestic violence aspect, we'll see some of that in the paid family leave arena. School visitation. So there's a mixed bag of what each state has. You'll get my theme here as I go through this presentation, but I like maps. So this is a visual to help us understand what's at play. This is like a big bowl of jelly beans, isn't it? Every state has, plus even Puerto Rico down here, has some form of state leave. And most of these are unpaid and established through that. And I've got a slide for the Northeast. But look at like some of this coastal aspect here on the West Coast. Look at California alone, all the different leave types. So just think if you're an HR manager in, Missouri or Kansas, and you have 2 employees in California. Now you have to be an expert on all of those state leave laws. Then even if you look here in the Midwest, what we have going on here. And then here's a visual of the Northeast. 225 state leaves that are in play. So think about employers. It's not uncommon for me to talk to customers that have employees in 30, 40 states based on their hiring practices today, post-pandemic, right? I want the best and brightest. I don't really care where they sit until this comes into play, or some of the PFML aspects. So again, it's more of just an awareness that there's layers to this process that employers have to really be ready for and to navigate. Before we get into the statutory disability here, we wanted to take and do a quick poll question here. So I think that's just popped up. So how many states have a state mandated statutory disability program for employees working in those states? I think Sandra, you're kind of tabulating what we have as we go through.
Yes, I am. We're getting close here.
Very good.
Okay. You see the results?
All right. Okay. Yeah. So we got 10 is the top choice, followed by 5 and then 4 and 2. Correct answer is 5. So that is the current amount that we have for the statutory. So little bit of a trick question, but we'll go in there. Let's carry on with our map theme here. So statutory disability, if you think back to what we talked about first, think about statutory as essentially a state mandated short-term disability program that's covering me, my serious health condition. Hawaii, California, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island. Those are the only 5 states that have those programs in place. I do not see any states looking to go down this specific path. If they're going to do something, they're probably going to look at more of a paid family and medical leave. You'll see later on, actually 4 of the 5 listed here have actually introduced some form of separate paid family leave. Hawaii is the only one that just maintains for the employee only. Here's a quick grid of kind of how those are structured for the 5 states. Another theme that as we go into this, if you've seen one state, you've seen one state, as the old adage goes. They're sliced and diced and handled differently and have different segments. Probably the only fairly consistent thing is under the waiting period and then primarily under this duration, but you can still see there's variables. Call out to like on California. Primarily, it works through the state. So an employer, whether they're in Kansas, but if they have employees working in California, they need to make sure that those employees are covered and that they're paying into the state. If you actually have a California-based employer, so like maybe all of their population is right there, an employer does have an option to opt out of the state plan and self-fund that piece of it. The tricky part to that is, it's a pretty rich benefit program, 60 to 70%, 1681 maximum, and 52 weeks. So not only do I have to self-fund it, but I have to make an improvement over the plan design. So I need to either offer a lower waiting period, a higher benefit percentage, or maybe even a higher maximum, because I doubt they're going to want to extend and increase that 52 weeks. New York and New Jersey are pretty common, right? That's not uncommon for employers to have those onesie twosies that are in those states. The biggest thing on this screen is to understand it's where I work, not where I live, right? So look at the difference between New Jersey and New York and the benefit amounts. If I live in New Jersey and I take the bridge over and I physically work in New York, I'm eligible for the 170. So it makes a distinction between where I live and where I work. All of these are based on where I work. And then one thing I'll call out here with like Rhode Island, you can see a lot of these states offer where an employer can opt out and work with a carrier and offer a private solution or self-fund it. Rhode Island is the only one of the 5. You have no opt-out option. As an employer, if you've got employees that work in Rhode Island, you must participate in the Rhode Island state plan, and the state plan pays all benefits and administers it. All right, paid family medical leave. Second poll question here. So which of the 3 states will be going live with their state mandated paid family medical leave programs in 2026? That was a mouthful. Looks like did everybody come in, Sandra? Oh, there we go. All right, so the leader in the clubhouse is Colorado, Maryland, and Delaware. The correct answer is the third one there. Minnesota, Delaware, and Maine are the three states that are going live. A bit of a trick question because Maryland was the one that did an update just recently to say timeout, we need to push this back. So as we get into this piece of it, it's really ever changing. So here's kind of the current landscape with the paid family medical leave. I've got what, five colors there. So green, these are the in-force states. So these are states that have, again, California is listed there because they have not only the statutory, but they also have a paid family leave component to it. So you can see in today's environment, very coastal on where it's at with, you know, kind of Minnesota and Colorado as far as the interior pieces of it. Then we've got the 4 states that have passed are in the future. So Minnesota, Delaware, Maryland, and Maine. Again, I'll get to Maryland and why that was kind of a part of the poll question and what they've recently announced. Yellow is our proposed. What I mean by proposed, at some point in time, there may not be active legislation that is either in committee or on the floors or going through that, but there has been a process where maybe it's come out of committee, it's gone to the House, but it died. Or it passed in the House, went to the Senate, and it died. So those are the states that are actively kind of putting things out there, putting feelers out there and looking at it. So there's a number of states that are looking at that piece. I mean, I'll use like New Mexico as an example. Like I want to say, it was 2 years ago, 18 months ago, it passed the House, it passed the Senate and went to the governor to sign, and the governor vetoed it. So it's been sliced and diced in different ways. I would say Michigan right now is looking at this. They rolled out a similar to kind of like what Missouri did with the accrued or paid sick leave. So I feel like they're kind of dipping their toes into this process. They did a similar accrued sick leave where as an employer, I can accrue up to 40 to 72 hours of sick leave that I can use and you'd be able to roll over. But they've also introduced a state mandated plan. So that could be one of the states that's looking. There's a number of states where there really hasn't been any foreseeable action, right? It's really not on their agenda or on their plate, maybe from budgetary reasons or just that's something they don't want to look at. And then red, I just want to call out, I'm using the term non-mandated. Red, and there is some similarities to kind of red-blue states here, as you can see kind of geographically. But the red states, what has been done is the state has actually passed PFML legislation, but they've stopped short of mandating it for employers. They're simply saying, hey, here's the structure. If you want to now, as an employer, to offer this, here's the plan design. And so you can self-fund that and do that on your own, or you can look to the insurance market and partner with a carrier to be able to offer this solution. So my words here, a little bit of kind of weak sauce in that piece of it, that they've just kind of checked the box that they've given some parameters, but there's not really any kind of substance behind that. And some carriers have gone into this arena, but not all carriers. So it's been tough. And here, like at Principal personally, we're kind of in a wait and see to see how this matures. And will some of these other states adopt a similar program? This kind of gives you a visual of when they came online. And here's that call out to those 4 states that have statutory, but then after they had that piece, they introduced a PFML or a PFL or a paid family leave module to that statutory piece of it, of when they went live. New York being the last one where they introduced their PFL program in 2018. But this just kind of gives you the lay of the land of when these have come live, when they were introduced. So to our poll question, originally Maryland was slated for a 2026 go live date. And just here within the last few weeks, they announced a little bit of cold feet and a timeout. They weren't ready. They weren't going to have, probably from a funding standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint, the ability to process and pay the claims and do that effectively. So they have kept it approved, but have pushed. So it's actually targeting now a 2028 effective date, with some of the pre-funding aspects of that starting in 2027. So Delaware, Minnesota, and Maine are still the ones that are going live, 2 in January of 26, and then Maine slated for May of 26. I will tell you, don't bet the farm on those. We've seen, Colorado and Oregon, the 2 most recent, had made, adjustments. So this is what we have today, is how I would frame it. What I wanted to do here was just give us, again, a good sense of kind of the plan design. And I think this will be something that, we can certainly share post presentation as a view. Many carriers like Principal, we have a website too that captures a lot of this information that is on our public site. So you, clients, anybody has access, even if you're not a Principal customer. So as we go through, what I wanted to provide you was just some visuals here of coverage options, eligible, excluded. I'm not going to read, all of this thing. I will try to call out maybe a nugget or two that we've gone through, and maybe what we've discovered as we've entered into this. One thing is, we go through these slides, pay attention to this eligible employee. Think about traditional insurance, right? Many times the default is full-time employees working 30 hours or more a week. FMLA, we establish, I have to have been with that employer at least 12 months and then work those 1,250 hours. The PFML world, it's usually very generous. So Colorado, for example, $2,500 is what. So think about Colorado specifically. Think about the ski industry, right? All the resorts, the influx of seasonal employees that they're hiring during those winter months when the resort is open and the ski lodge and everything, that now suddenly you have employees that may not be eligible for insurance benefits, but would be eligible for and qualify for PFML because they've met that $2,500. Often too, you'll see they're difficult to calculate. They're just not straightforward. I don't know why they do this, but it's just a lot of if this, then that kind of situations. And then the same way with benefit. Often it's kind of geared, what I would say, more towards the lower income strategy that allows that lower income to receive more of their take-home pay, right? And the higher earnings, there can be a carve out or a carve back on maybe what I'm able to do, and even based on these benefit amounts, right? The maximum amounts. So that's Colorado. Kind of the biggest thing is looking at that eligibility. Connecticut, some very, as you go through here, some different things. Starts day 1, right? So there's no waiting period. Think about an STD plan. That's traditionally like a 8-day waiting period or a 15-day. Day 1, as soon as I need to file that leave. Very generous as far as the piece of it. One thing I'll call out in Connecticut that is very unique to them is they do allow an employer to opt out of the state plan and go with an approved insurance carrier. However, the state has put in an additional hurdle for an employer. They have to actually submit, so to all of their employees working in Connecticut, a vote. And they have to have a 51% threshold. So 51% of those employees that are working there have to vote and approve for that employer to opt out. They're the only state that has that piece, but it's very unique and often a different challenge as you're working through with the employer. And some of them have just like, I don't want to deal with it. Delaware, this is a new one that's coming out. So we're just continuing to monitor. This is what we know today. And I tell you what, right? They go through all of these, but they've tried to maintain some similarity to what FMLA has. So that 1,250 hours. They are in their pre-funding, right? So pre-funding started already. So an employer had to start funding the plan in anticipation for January 26. So they had to start withholding their portion of the withholding and the employee's portion and paying that into the state. So the bank accounts at the state are ready and full and ready to pay claims on January of 26. Some of the benefits of going with a private solution or a carrier solution are that if I submit my application to say, I want out, I want to go to carrier X that's already been approved by you, by the state, I then now get out from underneath doing that pre-funding. So there's some value. And then I'm not having to do the withholdings. I'm not having to partner with my payroll service to make those changes. And I'm simply paying premium to the carrier as of January of 26. Maine, very similar. I don't have a lot to extend on there, but you can see they make a distinction between family leave, which is 0 days, day one, versus a medical leave. You can see they still try to do some different frequencies there. Same mentality on benefits. Lower earners can get up to 90%, but they often include this additional wording, not to exceed 50% of the state average weekly wage. If I'm over that, then I start to have a carve back where it's 66%. It's difficult, right? That's all I can say is that just you continue to see these one state at a time. Maryland, again, probably the biggest thing, they have paused, they've pushed back. There was actually a lot of work. So like at Principal, we were offering a solution. So we were doing a lot of quoting. So that's just kind of now paused and we'll have to re-engage at that point. So really nothing there. And I could see them potentially making some changes to this plan design at some point in the future before this goes live. Massachusetts, this is a big one, and that we've gone through. Again, W-2, full-time, part-time, or seasonal. So again, that same type of thing that often hits like with the Colorado pieces of it. There are some excluded individuals in there. Most of the states have it. They are one that have made it. Most of the states have one rate. Massachusetts has actually a different structure between the family leave and the medical leave on how they do that calculation. So they're unique in that aspect. And then they actually factor in some different durations based on that need. So what I was saying earlier, right? You've seen one state as we kind of go through this process. Minnesota, going live 1/1/26. One of the things to call out with Minnesota is they are not doing a pre-funding period. So again, most of the states, if they say they're going live on 1/1/26, typically at some point in 2025, they're saying, hey, employers, you need to start paying into this so we can fund and be ready to roll as of the effective date. Minnesota was one of the only that I'm aware of recently that has said, hey, from a surplus standpoint, where we've got surplus in our budget, so we don't need the pre-funding. We can actually be ready to go and go live. So employers are now just in this point of getting registered with the state. Some of them, depending on their population, are exploring whether they want to opt out and do it with a private insurance with their, carrier of choice, and going through that piece of it. But the pre-funding is probably the most unique with them. Oregon, this is one that actually was a little bit similar to Maryland in that they changed their effective date shortly before the original time. And they actually pushed it back within the same year, but a few months. So they have a very unique start date here. September 3rd of 2023 is when it actually went live. So it was a day after Labor Day of 2023 that they actually went through. Look at employees, or the eligible employees, $1,000, right? $1,000 in the previous year. So again, some of that same structure of like Colorado, that Oregon employers like, hey, here's my benefit eligible population. But now if I've got these part-time or seasonal workers, think agriculture. And so, if you've got some of those farms, think about some of the wine country that's up in Oregon, and they're maybe hiring on for the seasonal picking time. You could have those individuals that are eligible for PFML and wouldn't be eligible for any of your other medical or ancillary coverages as an employer. So something that they have to be aware of in the structure. 0 days is another call out, right? So versus a waiting period. And then we're rounding third and coming home here as we kind of get through this alphabetically. Washington, the biggest thing that I'll call out here is that many of the states, if allowed, many carriers are offering, private solutions. Not every carrier has done Washington because, like, for example, here at Principal, we're only offering a fully insured insurance model, right? So a traditional insurance, you pay us premium, we pay claims. In the state of Washington, I either, as an employer, have to be in the state plan, sending my contributions, and the state handles the claim administration of it. Or if I want to opt out, my only option is to do it on a self-funded basis. So not every carrier has allowed that. So truly, you may have an employer that if they self-fund it, meaning they also have to self-administer it, which often gets to be more difficult and more than they can bite off and be able to administer. So I would say an overwhelming large majority of Washington employers or employers with employees working in Washington stay in the state plan. They did not have a much uptick on opting out to a self-insured model. And then finally, with Washington, D.C., with the district and how they've put together, pretty straightforward as far as the plan design. This would be my call out. No carrier, no TPA can offer a solution. I, as an employer in the district, can't even self-fund it. If I have employees working in Washington, D.C., or I'm an employer based in Washington, D.C., and think about that area, think about that triangle or that quad, right, of Delaware and Maryland and D.C. and Virginia, and all of that piece. Again, go back to my original thought when we were talking about statutory. It's where I work. So if I, live in DC but work in Virginia, I'm not eligible for the DC PFML plan. It would be vice versa. I live in Virginia, but I drive over and I work actually in DC. Now I'm a covered employee for this. My only option for that employer is to stay within the state plan. So no other outside pieces of it. It's 100% operated by the district, funding, claim paying, and all of the administration. Last piece here, again, I think we'll share this, but I just wanted to kind of give a visual. These are some questions that I have used, or even I've given to some of our sales force to be able to use as they're talking with prospective clients about this kind of mushroom cloud of leave, right? Are their handbooks current? Are they up to date with everything from FMLA to ADA to that Pregnant Workers Fairness Act that just rolled out? Is everything there? Do they have return to work established in there? Do they have their call-in procedures? And if you don't do this, the actions that will happen. So just some good information here to help frame. Is there potentially something that they need to look at from an outsourcing standpoint, or just their own internal review to make sure that they're buttoned up and fully protected as they go through that particular process? So with that, I want to thank everybody for their time and what we walked through. A lot of information and just with all of those state variables, but I really appreciate the opportunity to present to the audience. And Matthew, I'll turn it to you to see if we've got any questions we need to address here.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, there were 2 questions that came in, so I'll pose one of them here as we have a couple minutes left in the hour. What's the best way to handle situations where an employee is not able to make or request the leave on their own?
So a lot of times it can be, this is a little bit of gray area. I think we're maybe talking about specifically, I'm going to assume FMLA. I don't know if it's called out in that actual question. Is there can be some of that issue of a known being that, I talked to my manager or supervisor, right? I've given them some awareness. I haven't maybe gone into the specifics of that particular reason that I'm off, but it can be essentially, that can be a known and start the clock that I'm calling in and I'm making them aware that I'm not going to be at work today. That can be a trigger to potentially ask additional questions and be determined if we need to actually, as an HR department or a business owner, look at that particular claim. So working with your managers and supervisors, they're the eyes and ears for your organization, and making sure that they have a good lay of the land and they're getting them connected and asking more questions.
Makes sense. Last question that we have so far, and then we'll open it up in just for 30 more seconds. What reporting options are available to track the trends, and is there any that you would recommend over other ones?
Yeah, well, certainly Principal, right? Excuse the commercial, right? We certainly have a platform that we offer our customers. But with that said, I would say, again, from a carrier content standpoint, number of carriers that have options in play, whether it's an outsourced model or partnership or an actual in-house model. But there are a number of, I would say, standalone services that actually offer too. So meaning they do like kind of full service, but it's not connected with the carrier. So companies like Sparrow is one that I've have knowledge of. Flores that is also in there, that not only are they giving you the compliance piece of it, but they're actually administering the claims. And then you have a whole subset of software options. So employers, so like AbsenceSoft, boy, I can name off a number of them. It seems like there's a new one that's bunching up every day, and we've even seen some of the payroll services offer some types of leave management. But yes, there are certainly some software. AbsenceSoft is one that I've certainly seen, and where if we've taken over a more robust, that's what the employer's using. So it gives them that compliance window. It'll help them create the letters, and then it'll help them track it. But it's HR actually using the tool to administer it.
Sure. Last question that came in. Can you please re-show the state leave types map?
Excuse my scrolling.
So many,
Probably like a strobe light. So is this was the actual state leave
Yes.
piece of it. Okay. Yeah.
and just a reminder, we will post on our website the recorded webinar, so you can go back through and look at it again as well. But if you'd like,
I always get a kick out of our friends in Idaho, Wyoming, and South Dakota. I think they had a little FOMO, right? They're like, well, we better throw one in, so we're part of the cool kids, and have something in play there. But yeah, every state and even Puerto Rico are in play.
well, looks like that is it. I don't see any other questions coming through, but those were 3 good ones.
Okay, awesome.
All right. Okay. Well, on behalf of the EBPA board, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us for the April webinar. Just a quick reminder that we do have the registration out there for the June seminar. We're going to have 5 dynamic speakers. We'd love to see you all there and pass it along to anyone else that needs to play hooky for 3/4 of a day from work and come and enjoy a great breakfast and lunch and 5 great speakers. So we hope to see you all there. And Dan, we as from the board, we want to thank you, and we have a hearty handshake to extend you virtually, and we'll send you a nice gift card in the mail.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the invitation.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.